the last time I can say spoilers this season. Hello out there, I'm the Oldest Nerd, and we're talking about the season finale of Star Trek Discovery, this one called Will You Take My Hand? And let's start with some of the predictions that I made. First of all, I was right about them making some kind of plot to stop Georgiou. In fact, Saru and Burnham did get together and form an alliance after so many episodes from the very beginning of being kind of rivals with each other. And yet they were together on keeping Georgiou from doing something that was way against the idea of the Federation, which Saru had put so clearly and so beautifully a couple of episodes ago. So that was something that they were going to do, and the fact that they did it in a very clever way was also good. A way they didn't have to kill Georgiou, which is something that Burnham was trying not to do. She didn't want to see Georgiou die twice, and so this was a novel way of getting Georgiou to win out and still not destroy Kronos. And also something to be said for the way that Georgiou thought of Michael Burnham, even not Burnham of her own universe. She still cared for her, and that saved Burnham's life and also saved the lives of millions of Klingons. I want to also mention about Ash. We weren't certain if Ash Tyler was going to continue on the program at all. It looks like that he might, but in not the way we might have expected. He's not going to stay on Discovery, but he's going back with L'Rell and help her take over and unite all of the houses of the Klingon Empire. This is something that some people have said, well, you can't end the war in a single episode. And I was saying it myself, but the way they're doing it is not so much ending the war, but ending hostilities and making a united Klingon world that may eventually be a problem to the Federation, as we see in the original series, but not of all-out war. It becomes a Cold War, and we see how that now started. It was a good way to do it, well written as far as that went. Also, I mentioned, and I was right about this, that Starbase One indeed was Earth. And it wasn't that the Klingons weren't interested in the Earth, as I might have surmised, but also that they just hadn't attacked it yet and were about to. And this vaporization of Kronos was going to stop them from invading the Earth, although I'm not sure that that would have done that. If you blow up their planet, what have they got to lose by attacking? So Burnham's idea to do a peaceful way of ending the conflict was really very clever, and it was very cleverly written. All right, we have some answers to some of the questions that we had in our last video. First of all, there's no time travel. They didn't have to time travel to settle all of this. Now, it leaves some things unsettled, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, we have Michael finding a peaceful end with her mutiny record expunged from her military records. There is, in fact, no recorded incident of a mutiny aboard a Starfleet vessel, as Spock will say in the original series. Then the war is ended. It's a big step up for the Federation, who is prepared to take the low road and destroy an entire section of a race of people, including women and children, and apparently Orion Bordello owners, not to mention Clint Howard. So that was a real reason that they would have given her her rank back. She basically saved the Federation's bacon by doing what she did. So she's a commander again, and she's been returned to the Discovery as science officer. Presumably Saru will continue to be first officer. And since Tilly had something to do with it as well, they move her from a cadet to an officer in the engineering division, and still on her long-term path to eventually become a captain. So we don't know what the deal was with the spore. we still have the Spore to wonder about in the next season of the show as to whether Tilly becomes the 7 of 9 characters we mentioned last time, or if it's something else that is hidden for a one-time surprise. We'll see what happens there. And I have an idea nobody else has mentioned, but I'm thinking that the original series Klingons looked a lot like humans, and maybe Ash Tyler and L'Rell get together and they help start a whole house of Klingons that look like humans that are used in the original series. And all of the other type of Klingons have similarly had their gene pool messed with until they look like Worf by the next generation. Now, here's some things we've learned from this last show. First of all, the Mirror Georgiou, as we mentioned earlier, really cares about Burnham. And it goes beyond the fact that it's not the same Burnham. She would not kill her. She had the opportunity to take a Nausicaan blaster, and I wonder if you caught the Nausicaan thing, who they originally attacked Picard when he was a cadet in a bar fight, and he had to have an artificial heart as a result of this Nausicaan attack. They never showed the Nausicaans, but an interesting little Easter egg to mention it in this program. Also, I liked the Orion Bordello. We haven't seen an Orion Bordello since the cage and later the menagerie, where Captain Pike is in the Orion Bordello with the green woman dancing. Apparently it got a whole lot more, a lot less G-rated in other rooms that Captain Pike wasn't in at that time. At any rate, that attracts Georgiou, so we learned that Georgiou likes to do threesomes, and that was part of what was going on there. Now, she presumably did it to get information, but she was from the Evil Empire, so I guess she could get away with dealing with a little debauchery before blowing up the world. The Federation ideals, I think, is another thing that we learned, is something that does not come automatically. We've almost assumed this because we've always been on the flagship ship of the Federation anytime that we've been on a Star Trek show, with the exception of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but it was always these ideals of the Federation that were upheld, and they never really talked about how difficult those are to uphold, because human nature, even over the centuries, doesn't change much. If you go back 200 or 300 years, people were pretty much the same as they are now. We just have more technology. All the bridge crew gets the Medal of Honor from the Federation, including Dr. Culber, who died in the line of duty at the hands of Ash Tyler's alter ego, which has been truly expunged. We found out that from this episode that it wasn't an act. He wasn't pretending to be human and the Klingon gone, but the Klingon actually is gone. He just has the memories, and he's going to use those memories to help rebuild Kronos with L'Rell. And because of that, we may see Tyler again. We may see L'Rell again, and we might even see Lorca again. You never can tell, because they've left these kind of things open. Now, we've encountered the Enterprise at the very end of the episode, and obviously next season there's going to be some interaction with Captain Pike, and perhaps we'll see the interior of the Enterprise. I'd like to see what their idea of a reworked version of the original series Enterprise would look like, because obviously the sets that were designed for the original series Enterprise were cheap. They were plywood, and they would use metal these days. It would look maybe more like the movie bridge on the Enterprise than the original series bridge, so we'll see what they come up with there. We need to know what Captain Pike's emergency is, and if that's going to be the entire story arc of next season. Is there going to be something that affects Captain Pike that he's going to need the help of Discovery for? Or, is he going to take command for a certain amount of time of Discovery? That would be kind of interesting. Some people are wondering if they'll be able to get the same actors to play Pike and Spock if Spock is used. And that would be interesting if they did that. Bruce Greenwood obviously made a great Captain Pike, but perhaps a little older than he would need to be for this particular series, because they show Captain Pike probably 10 years after this happens. So this is near the end of Captain Pike's 5-year mission, and there's not really anything written between the end of his time on the Enterprise and his accident, which put him in the wheelchair. So we have some space to play with here, and it may include a lot of Captain Pike. And as I mentioned, we'd like to see Spock. If there is even a passing meeting between Spock and Michael Burnham, it might illuminate why Spock never mentioned her. Of course, he never mentioned his crazy brother that they met in Star Trek V. And I would like to take Star Trek V out of canon, but they sold tickets for it, so there it is. So he had a brother that he never talked about during the original series as well, and never spoke about him after Star Trek V, understandably. So it's possible that he would have had a half-sister that he didn't speak about either. And the other question that I have is, are we going to see Dr. Culber again? They keep hinting around, especially in the After Trek segments, that Culber might come back in some way or other. Maybe not as a ghost, maybe not as a memory, maybe not as in the mirror universe, but some other way. Perhaps that has something to do with that green spore that landed in Tilly's shoulder. We don't know, and it's going to take us a while to find out. It could be January of next year before we find out what happens there. And in fact, if the next season is going to involve Pike and the Enterprise or similar things like that, will Discovery reach Vulcan before the end of next season? So those are my questions. You may have some comments. I'd love to hear them. Please subscribe by clicking on the N, and also leave me a comment down there. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Don't go far.